Leading Edge Technology. I'm VP of Engagement, John Collins.
And I'm CTO Howard Holton.
So this week we're trying to cut through the jargon and give you what you need to make sense of it all around particularly the topic of incident management operations. Are we there yet? How come it ain't fixed? So let's do it. Okay, the thing I fluffed, obviously, Nora, was to introduce you on the intro. Let's speak to you. So I'm going to get straight to that and say, hey, Nora, great to have you on here. And why don't you just tell us a few words about yourself and what brings you to talk about this topic?
Cool. Yeah. Hi. Thanks, John. Thanks, Howard. I'm Nora Jones. I was the founder and CEO of a company called Jelly.io, which was an incident management company really focused on coordination, communication, specifically after the fact in incidents. And we recently got acquired by PagerDuty in November. So I'm now a senior director of product at PagerDuty, really focusing on the post-incident space and helping PagerDuty connect that feedback cycle for everything that happens after a page goes off.
I love that term, a post-incident. It's like, post-apocalyptic or post-human or something. It's but you're and we did briefly talk about this. So I kind of you actually were one of those founders that was someone that thought, I've got to fix this thing. So maybe just give us that in a nutshell. When was the epiphany and how did that come about? And you just thought, yeah, really?
It was kind of a slow burn through my career. I feel like, so I've been in incidents my whole career. I've been a software engineer, but really focused on like the reliability and risk side. I worked at Netflix and Slack in a company that got acquired by Walmart. And one thing I was always wanting more out of after the incident happened is if any of those companies did a post-mortem, I felt like we kind of just rushed through putting it together. And it was really hard to take the time to get all the data needed to make a really good post-incident review. And when we had a really good incident review, we actually learned from it and we actually applied those learnings and we had really good action items and like everyone was feeling good, but it took so much time to do that. And so we frequently didn't do it the right way. And so I really wanted to make it easy for companies to gather this data and make it easy for them to do it the right way. I mean, I feel like I've met a lot of founders that get so annoyed with the way a thing works that they end up starting their own company. And that was a little bit about what happened here.
Mm-hmm. And it just reminds me when I was working, it was actually when I was working on the other side of the fence, the kind of DevOps break down the wall of confusion, the other side of the wall of confusion on the dev side. And there was we spoke to someone on the infrastructure side where we wanted to deploy an application. And the way that the developers were talking to him, he took me to one side and he said, those people, they've got no idea what it's like in here. And it's just that kind of constant firefight. To your point, you never stop. There's always fires to be put out. There's always problems to be solved. They're always big enough to be massively distracting. You never kind of go, got a clear day today. Maybe I'll tidy up.
Yeah. Maybe I have time to have an incident today. Yeah, no one ever says that. And then it's like when you take the time to actually respond to it, and then you have all this other time you need to take to learn from it. It's like by that point you're exhausted and you're already behind on all the other work you were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. I have 80% of the people I need to deal with the incidents that I have. Mm-hmm. 0% of the people I need to talk about the incidents I had yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Howard.
So hang on, I missed the end bit. You say that again slowly. You have 80%.
I have 80% of the people I need to deal with the incidents that are occurring. I have 0% of the people I need to talk about the incidents that happened yesterday.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right. And that's ultimately the problem. Right. Incident response after action is done poorly because nobody cares enough to do it right. And we don't have the tools in place to make it easy. Right. Like, do you want me to write this report really well, or do you want me to deal with this next alert that we have? Which I can do one or the other. I cannot do both. And so it ends up being, from one firefight to another firefight to another firefight, hoping nothing becomes a 3-alarm fire.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
when there's a 3-alarm fire, we spend a lot of time doing an after-action incident report on something, frankly, that we're not likely to get a tremendous amount of value from, because 7 things happened in a way they'd only happen one time to create that 3-alarm fire. The number of times that we did an after-action and took action and remediation on a 3-alarm fire to prevent something that required lightning striking twice in the same place, versus the 50 things that happened during the week that would actually happen 50 times the next week and 50 times the week after, that we never did it after action at to really try to resolve the issue. Like, there's also this kind of, you did big after actions on the things that upper management noticed, which was never,
Mhm.
it was actually costing the business all the money.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. You brought up so many things I want to pull on, Howard. There's so many good nuggets in there. I mean, I think a big part of the challenge, you mentioned a few challenges. You mentioned data collection being a challenge, time being a challenge, and like the world of possibilities of all the things that you could do post-incident reviews on is also a challenge. And like, folks don't always get celebrated for doing this great incident report. They get celebrated for dealing with an incident in the moment. And so I think individuals are also weighing, like, am I going to be valued in the company if I spend time doing this post-incident report? And so I bring this up because I think it takes buy-in from all parts of the spectrum in the organization. And I've really seen it be really valuable when it's done well. But like you brought up, it's hard to make it done well. And I think some of it needs tooling in order to be done well.
Well, I think it absolutely needs tooling, right? Because you have a big incident has 5 teams involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A big incident may have 30 people involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, let's say you've got a location that got ransomed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's going to have 30, 40, 50 people involved. It's going to have impacts both in IT and in operations, right? And a good incident report involves all of those things. Mm-hmm. Just figuring out who was involved 3 days later becomes really, really hard without tooling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right.
Agreed. And it's so. Go ahead, John.
I want to jump to the tooling thing, but I do just want to. I think we should big up the incident report at this point. I think we should just say, it should be the case that you look at it and go, wow, man, that's a fantastic incident report. I think, employee of the month because of that incident report. That should happen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then so did you think, to Howard's point as well, did you think, but we've got all the data we need, we just need to kind of plop it into a place? Or did you think, what was the process of getting from that problem space to the solution space?
Yeah, I think when I was an engineer and I was working on post-incident reports, I could see the value of it, but I would spend so much time even collecting all the data that by the time I got all the data into one place, I then had to like analyze it and amalgamate it. And then at that point, once I was done with that, I then had to distribute it and get my colleagues to read it and take time on it. And like there was a change management process as well. So it was a lot of hats to wear for an individual that was just trying to like teach their colleagues about the system. And so I wanted to automate the parts that I really thought machines could do and don't need a human, which is collecting the data, right? I wanted to help the human like parse the data and pick out the interesting parts, but I wanted to give them shoulders to stand on there. And so that was like a big focus of the tool. And I lost my train of thought for a second, but I think another big focus of the tool is like actually helping you tell the story and bring your colleagues in and like help them actually learn from it as well.
I guess the place I want to end up in about 10 minutes on this thing is, and I'm now thinking, how do I get back to this point? Which, so you get all of the, you get the automation, you get the kind of, and there's all the steps you went through to actually build that and create something that people could then use. And then the point I want to get to is, but you can't just get kind of a bunch of automation and everything starts working.
Mhm.
because it's
Yeah.
there's the everything else, and it's what's the shape of the everything else. So I
Mhm.
guess briefly to link the two things, the when the tool is deployed, how does, and I don't want this to turn into a product thing either, but how does it, do you just kind of throw it at an organization and go, there you go, you can start, you can start automating your incident stuff now, and your hindsight view is all in a nice report now? Or how does that then fit into every, because again, people are firefighting, how can they pick this stuff up and run with it?
Yeah. So I think after an incident, people are first looking at, is the incident actually closed? And then when they get into incident review mode, they are trying to start collecting the data. And so they first look at like where people were talking about the incident, which could be Slack, it could be a Zoom chat, it could be Teams. Then they're gathering that data, and then they're looking at like their dashboards, they're looking at their logs, and they're grabbing all that data and putting it in one place. And so I think that is like a key part of what a lot of folks do after incidents, and it's where a lot of the tool focused on that particular part of things. And so the rollout of that tends to be pretty easy because people were doing it anyway, and it makes a process that was very long, very short.
Mm-hmm.
The other parts of the product are a little bit more just meeting your org where it is today and figuring out what works best for your organization.
Mm-hmm. It just again takes me back. I was involved in what was called Network Management Lights Out project. So we had shift workers that were in front of big consoles and then big telecommunications kit. And today, you got it easy. You got APIs. We were literally going through the black box catalog and working out RS-232 interfaces so we could screen scrape. But the goal was the same, right? It was to pull all of this information into a single place, such that then, and our goal back then, this dates it really, was to trigger a bleeper when there was an incident. Your goal is to pull similar information after the event, because sure, they've been using it throughout the event from all the different places, but no one ever thought of putting it after the event to then create that that report card on the incident and to get the learnings from it. So with all of that, what does the report do?
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Went
think,
on.
John, you brought up a point earlier where, if someone makes a good report, their employee of the month, and I know it was a little cheeky, but one thing I've seen with folks that actually, engineers that take the time to write good incident reports, is it's usually like very good engineers or engineers that are on their way to becoming very good engineers, because they end up learning so much about how the system works as they're putting together that report. And so they leave like creating that report with new knowledge about the system. They have new knowledge about who to page in certain situations. They have new knowledge about like how certain things work, how to read certain logs that they might not have had before. And so I see sometimes those people start becoming like really well-known entities in their organization and like really good engineers, not just because they wrote an incident report, but because they're developing expertise. And I would say the real value of it is not writing the report. It's developing expertise, not just for the individual, but for the whole organization. So if you're passing off who's writing it, your whole org is going to level up and things are just going to start getting smoother.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a good opportunity to look at where the wrong engineers are.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you have an incident report written by the engineer responsible for the application, which is likely the person who's writing the report, and you're looking at two of them done 2 months apart, and one is an expert report with exactly the right amount of detail. Actions are clearly defined. Advice back to the organization is clearly defined. Like, you really get a solid report, and then you get one that looks like it was put together by, Mrs. Marsh's kindergarten class, right? As a democratized use of crayons and stickers, and you go, oh, I can clearly see I have an engineer that is properly placed, and I have someone that's probably not properly placed as an engineer. I probably don't want that engineer to be in charge of a production application that's important enough that we're going to spend 3 days doing an after action report.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many factors into how and why an incident report becomes not good or great. I mean, I've seen really great engineers write very terrible incident reports before. And I think some of it is like, it's a completely different skill set than operating your application, is talking about it and explaining it to people. And sometimes it's really hard to get out of this like, oh, this is so obvious mindset. Like there was a really good engineer at an org I worked at that was managing this complex service, and they had been managing it for 7 years. And there was a short incident on it, and they wrote like a 5-line incident report because it was so obvious to them why it broke and why it failed that it wasn't worth talking about. But it wasn't obvious to everyone else in the org, and everyone else could have learned a little bit more about how their application worked had the incident report been longer. But in that case, I wouldn't put that engineer in charge of writing the incident report. I would put someone else that's also technical but doesn't know anything about this person's application in charge of like doing a cognitive style interview on them, where they're pulling information about their application out into a report and they're writing the incident review. And I see that work really well in orgs when you're like almost trading who writes the incident review, and it's not always the person that is like deeply in charge of that application.
I could see that working, but I can also see that now putting that engineer in a position where their hard skills remain really good and their soft skills never improve, because you're not forcing them to invest in that area, right?
Well, they would have to go do it for the other application, right? So they wouldn't do it for their own application. They would do it for someone else's, right? And so they're, yeah, exactly. And so then they start learning about the other applications as well. And so you're putting them on the spot, but not always putting them on the spot for their particular service. Like, I'm sure you all have seen deep experts in something try to talk about what they do. And it is sometimes really hard for them to put themselves in like a beginner mindset or explain clearly what they do, because they're just so far removed from it. And so that's kind of what that trading authors does.
I could see that.
One of my first ever jobs was to document someone else's software. I was writing CAD systems for ASICs, and he wrote the compaction tool. So just make the silicon smaller. And it was only afterward that I'd kind of spent a long time with him, worked it all out and written it down, that I realized no one understood. No one understood what he talked about ever. And he
Yes.
would eventually. So this whole thing was just a rules engine with a matrix flip in the middle of it, and a geometric rules engine. And everyone went, "Oh, thank God!" Because if he'd been run over by a bus, that would have been it.
Right,
they
exactly.
couldn't have fixed anything. But I'm absolutely enthralled by the fact that we're not just writing reports about incidents. We're creating training tools, sure.
Yes.
We're creating better engineers, sure.
Yeah.
We're creating wisdom.
Yeah.
We're creating a path to wisdom. I don't want to go too philosophical. I do want to go philosophical.
Yeah,
But we're literally giving a journey. We're creating a pathway to a higher level of insights about the systems that we're operating, and it's so amazingly powerful.
Yeah, it ultimately improves performance. There's this cognitive psychologist who studies organizations. His name's Gary Klein. And he talks about errors a lot in organizations. And he says, like, organizations that just focus on reducing errors never actually improve. They also need to focus on increasing insights. And so he has a simple equation like performance improvement equals error reduction plus insight generation. And I think so much of the tech industry just focuses on the error reduction piece, and we don't focus on the insight and generation piece. And so we keep being on this hamster wheel of like fighting fires and like focusing on the next thing, because it's just like, I feel like it makes more sense in our minds as engineers. It's like binary. It's easy to focus on like errors, but it's not as easy to focus on insights and really like helping people learn and train and learning yourself. But I think it really improves businesses.
Mm-hmm. It's the what rather. I mean, as engineers, we need to. It's easy to kind of go further and further towards the back of the cave.
Mhm.
And we need to, be reminded that the sun exists.
Yeah.
And so we focus on the what, and we go deeper and deeper into the what, and we kind of forget the why if we're not careful.
Mhm.
So it just brings back to the why.
Mhm.
Why did it matter that this thing was failing? Why did that system matter in the failure? Why did
Yeah.
that small error cause a bigger error elsewhere?
Yeah.
And why did it have to happen, and what would have meant it not happen, and therefore everything else? The kind of avalanche effect that a problem
Mhm.
can bring, or the Swiss cheese effect,
Yeah.
or whatever. It's getting engineers to think about the why, and generally people, they go, "Oh, yeah, great, of course, yeah, of course, I was thinking about beyond just the tech stuff."
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do it all the time.
And like the how it works as well. And I think if you're taking the time to actually document it and share it, you could even use some of that in the middle of an incident. And in fact, we have seen engineers do that. Like when they have a really great incident report that they took the time to write out how the system is supposed to work, people can use that in the moments of an incident too to help them resolve it more
And
quickly.
I want to bring up the people factor as well, because it's when we were on the what, why, and how, there's also the whom. So
Mhm.
often problems happen because somebody forgot to turn on the so and so, or that role wasn't properly defined, or whatever. And it's interesting how you start. When you were describing the kind of the route to collation of information, you started with the Slacks and the Teamses and so on. About it was the human element first.
Mhm.
Who was looking at what, why, when, kind of
Mhm.
thing, and then you go into the logs about kind of, and what did they find out.
Yeah. I think a big part of that I see orgs mess up on a little bit is focusing. I think it's really easy to say, so and so press this button, and that was what like triggered all this. But you know, I think the harder questions to ask are like, how did the system enable them to press that button? Like, why did it make sense for them to press that button at the time? Because if it made sense to them, it's going to make sense to other people in the future. And so really like going a layer deeper and just figuring out how the system enabled certain things to happen rather than like poking on the why, I think is where orgs get the most value out of these.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, right? Especially if it's a vendor application, you include the vendor in the after action.
Mhm.
We had
Yeah.
this
Oh
incident.
yeah.
This is what happened. We found that this button is mislabeled. It actually does this thing, but it leads people down this path, and so
Yeah.
consider an improvement. Or we've identified a thing that should be hidden, should be placed under an ACL so that not everyone has access to it, or whatever
Yeah.
it happens to be.
Mhm.
But I've seen that a lot. Right, where
Totally.
you're now having to retrain somebody. Like, I get that the button says this, but it doesn't actually do that. It does this thing instead. And the
Mhm.
reality
Yeah.
is, like, I had a really interesting one years and years and years ago, and it was a management interface managing multiple NASs, network attached storage devices, and that ran our whole business.
Mhm.
We were doing a simple upgrade, right? But the central console did not make it obvious which of the NAS clusters you were connected to. And
Yeah.
so when the vendor's engineer went to reboot the non-production NAS, he did not realize he was connected to the production NAS. Well, the reboot was just a shutdown.
Mm.
Someone had to physically go to the data center and turn it
Wow.
back on. Of course, no one knows this is happening because it's non-production, and the
He's
communication,
restarting it. Yeah.
"Hey, it's non-production, I can do my thing." So he does his thing, and I get an email, "Hey, I think I just shut down your production NAS at 11 o'clock in the morning. Someone's gonna have to drive to your data center in another state and turn it back on." Bit of an awful conversation to have, right? And an
Oh,
awful
terrible.
after action that then leads down the
Okay.
path of, okay, so like, one, we're going to update our documentation even though it wasn't our people, but two, if the vendor's top engineer
Mhm.
has the same problem, maybe the vendor needs to look at how they've done the design as well, and
Right.
maybe, make it a little bit clearer, like, hey, this has 350,000 open files. You sure you want to restart it? You sure
Yeah.
that's the thing to do right now? Right? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
something other than just, okay, we've shut it down for you. I hope you have fun.
And that's back to often it's back to engineers not realizing that they need to design for usability. I've never heard anyone say this, but it's like someone saying, "No, not that stop button. It's the other stop button."
Well, but
I
it goes back to that thing that Nora said really early on, which I really liked, which is if you ask someone that's really good at anything to explain the thing that they're really good at, they're going to use a series of shorthand that's only available to people who are also really good at that thing.
yes, Howard.
Right?
Yeah, and that's what happens when people design the products too. They're almost designing it as if the end user has like all the same knowledge about this button
Yeah.
as they do all the time. And this end user is thinking about this button like 1/16th the amount that this designer is. And so it's
Or
just like,
1/60th, or
yeah,
you know what I mean? It like that
yeah,
particular button, you may only press the shutdown once every 300 times you're in the interface. And you're
right,
not in the interface all day long.
right.
As right? It kind of runs itself. You're in the interface maybe once a day, maybe. You know what I mean? Like, you better not be more than that, or the thing's not running right.
Yeah.
So yeah, they always design for themselves. If I could give any piece of advice to engineers, it's design for not you.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
Right? Design for your child, design for your nephew, design for Miss
Right.
Markle kindergarten class. Like design for someone that's going to click all of the buttons all of the time and make all of the mistakes all of the time,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And has none of your knowledge,
Yeah.
right? So, and if you can't teach someone to run it in an hour, then start over.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't mean be an expert in an hour.
Yeah.
Run it in an hour? Yeah, for sure.
If I
Mhm.
can pick up on one thing you said, Howard, though, you did use the phrase "simple upgrade," which, I mean, I have there's no such thing, right? You can it's like kind of as soon as you're thinking it's a simple upgrade, it's like walk away really, really slowly, and don't touch anything at all until you know it's a complicated upgrade.
Kind of
Just
agreed.
put that out
Right.
there. So if we were to, I mean, that's kind of my pithy glib piece of advice to anybody doing anything. This has been so. I mean, if you'd said, "Hey, let's do a podcast about incidents," it's like, you know,
Yeah.
but this has been absolutely fascinating. We found the path to nirvana. We've
Yeah.
got so much good stuff coming out of this. Is there anything that you'd kind of want to leave someone with? Mine's no such thing as a simple upgrade, but and we've had all this great stuff around design for someone else and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. What would you leave someone with, Nora?
I would say like take real time to invest in what happens after the incident is closed and after the page goes off. I see a lot of orgs naturally invest in the before pieces and like the prevention pieces, but really getting like proactive about understanding is going to make all that other stuff that you're doing easier. And so just my last parting piece is to be really intentional about it.
Howard?
Be purposeful. I like intentional. Be purposeful in who you assign, in what the goal is, and be really clear in setting expectations around incident management and post incident management, especially. Make sure that the focus is on delivering not CYA, because that tends to be what it is, right? You're not delivering oops to the executive team. You're delivering lasting value to your organization, right? And so really make sure that you're focused there on the lasting value to the organization.
Awesome.
Well, this has been another episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Techie. Nora, thank you so much for joining us. This has really been a lot of fun. Kind of being able to put on my operations hat and walk through my PTSD of 20 years of running this stuff and dealing with with carrying the 15 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bucket has been fun, right? It's nice to kind of disassemble why we do the things that we do and try to reassemble it into what we should do. So I really appreciate it. Hopefully our audience did too. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. And if you'd like to be on the podcast or have a topic for us, please reach out. And we'll see you on our next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.